Fire over the Solomon Sea. First contact. August 7, 1943. 18,000 feet above the Solomon Sea, Southwest Pacific. The engine rattles like a living thing, metal vibrating through the cockpit as heat bleeds in from the tropical sun. Sweat runs down the inside of the pilot's goggles, blurring the horizon where ocean blue meets sky white. Below, scattered clouds drift like torn cotton. Somewhere beyond them, Japanese-held islands wait, bristling with guns. Lieutenant Robert Bob Mitchell, United States Army Air Forces, tightens his grip on the control stick of his P-40 Warhawk. The aircraft is heavy, blunt-nosed, nothing like the elegant Japanese fighters he's been warned about. The Warhawk growls rather than sings. It does not forgive mistakes. This is Mitchell's fourth combat patrol. The radio crackles. Bandits, 2 o'clock high. Multiple contacts. Bob's eyes snap right. At first, nothing, just glare. Then he sees them. Dark specks slicing down out of the sun, wings flashing silver. A 6M0s. At least a dozen. Maybe more. Veterans had told him the stories back on Guadalcanal. Don't turn with a zero. Climb fast or die. One mistake, and you won't even know what hit you. Bob exhales slowly. His heart pounds, but his hands are steady. The formation breaks apart instantly. Sky becomes chaos. Engine noise, tracer fire, spiraling contrails. A zero flashes past Bob's canopy, close enough that he can see the red rising sun painted on its wing. The Japanese pilot banks hard, confident, inviting a turn fight. Bob doesn't take it. Instead, he shoves the nose down. The Warhawk dives, speed building brutally. Wind screams over the fuselage. The altimeter spins. A zero follows, then another. They're faster in the turn, lighter, more agile. They're predators, and they know it. Bob glances at his airspeed gauge. Too fast. Too steep. Any instructor would be yelling at him right now. At 9,000 feet, Bob does something no training manual ever suggested. He cuts throttle. The engine coughs. The Warhawk shudders violently, losing speed in a heartbeat. The nose lifts unexpectedly. For a split second, the aircraft feels like it might fall out of the sky entirely. The zero behind him can't react fast enough. It overshoots, slips past Bob's right wing, its pilot committed to the dive, suddenly exposed. Bob slams the throttle forward. The Allison engine roars back to life. He rolls left, lines up the gun sight, and squeezes the trigger. 6.50 caliber machine guns hammer the sky. The zero erupts in flame. Bob doesn't cheer. He doesn't even breathe. He's already moving, banking hard as another Japanese fighter streaks past where he was a moment earlier. Around him, the air battle rages. Smoke columns rise from the ocean. A parachute blossoms far below. American or Japanese, he can't tell. The radio is a mess of shouting, clipped commands, static. Bob's Warhawk lumbers compared to the zeros dancing around him. On paper, he should be dead already. But Bob Mitchell isn't flying by paper. As another zero dives on him head-on, Bob remembers something entirely different. A memory from years earlier, standing on a tractor seat as a boy, engine chugging beneath him, watching the ground slope unexpectedly. He remembers the moment right before the wheels lost grip, the instinctive cut of power, the way weight shifted just enough to keep the machine from rolling. You didn't think on a farm. You felt. Bob rolls inverted, pulls back hard. Then, again, cuts throttle mid-maneuver. The Warhawk hangs awkwardly, almost floating. The zero flashes by underneath, too fast, too eager. Bob fires again. Another Japanese plane spirals down trailing smoke. This wasn't luck. This was something else. Above the Solomon Sea, Lieutenant Bob Mitchell is doing something terrifyingly simple. He's breaking every rule the enemy expects him to follow. And for the first time, the zeros aren't circling confidently anymore. They're hesitating. And hesitation, Bob knows from long days in open fields and broken machinery, is when things start to die. Lessons from dirt and steel, an instinct forged before war. The surviving zeros scatter, climbing hard, searching for altitude and advantage. Bob Mitchell doesn't chase them. His Warhawk is already bleeding speed, engine temperature climbing dangerously. He eases back, scanning the sky, every muscle tight, waiting for the next attack. Only when the radio crackles with a breathless voice. "Mitchell, you see that? You just dropped 2 of them." Does the moment fully land? Bob swallows. 2 kills. In less than a minute. Later, back at Henderson Field on Guadalcanal, the adrenaline drains away, leaving only exhaustion and confusion. Ground crews swarm his P-40, counting bullet holes, slapping the fuselage like it's a living thing that made it home against the odds. Someone offers congratulations. Someone else shakes his head in disbelief. In the debriefing tent, a captain frowns at Bob's account. "You cut throttle in a dive?" the officer asks slowly. Bob nods. "Yes, sir." The captain exhales, rubs his face. "You're lucky to be alive, Lieutenant." Bob doesn't argue. He just listens. But inside, something clicks into place. Because that maneuver, dangerous, reckless, borderline suicidal, didn't feel lucky at all. It felt familiar. Bob Mitchell was born far from oceans and runways, on a patch of stubborn farmland in the American Midwest. His childhood wasn't measured in school terms or seasons of sports, but in harvests, broken engines, and weather that could turn on you without warning. By the age of 12, he could strip a tractor engine blindfolded. By 14, he knew the sound a machine made right before something went catastrophically wrong. When you worked the land, there was no instruction manual thick enough to save you. You learned by doing, by failing, by surviving. Machines didn't care about rules. They cared about balance, weight, timing. That instinct stayed with him when he joined the Army Air Forces in 1941. Flight school instructors had noticed it almost immediately. Mitchell wasn't the cleanest pilot. He wasn't the fastest learner when it came to checklists or textbook maneuvers. But when things went wrong, engine failure drills, emergency recoveries, sudden stalls, he reacted faster than anyone else. Once, during a mock dogfight, he nearly stalled his aircraft intentionally. The instructor tore into him afterward. "That kind of flying will get you killed in combat," the man snapped. Bob had just nodded, silent, respectful. He didn't know how to explain that sometimes the edge of disaster was exactly where control lived. Back in the Pacific, the Japanese had built their entire aerial doctrine on predictability. Zeros lured opponents into turning fights. They exploited enemy pilots who clung too closely to training. Against most Americans, it worked. Against Bob Mitchell, it didn't. His next patrol came 3 days later. August 10, 1943, 21,000 feet over New Georgia. The mission is escort. B-25 Mitchell bombers heading toward Japanese positions hidden in jungle and rock. Anti-aircraft fire blooms black below. Then the warning comes again. Bandits, 12 o'clock. Hi. Bob feels it now. Not fear, but anticipation. A tightening behind the eyes. A sharpening. 6 Zeros dive straight through the bomber formation. Tracers rip past aluminum skins. One bomber lurches, trailing smoke. Bob pushes forward. Bob pushes forward. A Zero snaps onto his tail almost instantly. Bob can feel it. The pressure, the invisible hand closing. He banks, dives, builds speed. The Zero follows, closer this time. Smarter. Bob waits longer than before. The ocean races up toward him, blue filling the canopy. The altimeter unwinds. Any second now, logic says he should pull up. Instead, he does the unthinkable again. Throttle, idle. The Warhawk bucks violently. Warning lights flash. The Zero overshoots, but not as badly this time. The Japanese pilot recovers quickly, rolling to re-engage. Bob adjusts. He adds a half roll, a slight rudder kick. Something improvised, unplanned. The Zero slides just far enough out of position. Bob fires. The Japanese fighter disintegrates midair. That makes 3. Over the next 20 minutes, the pattern repeats itself across the sky. Bob doesn't fly the same maneuver twice. Sometimes he cuts power. Sometimes he dives beyond reason, then yanks the stick at the last possible second. Sometimes he slows so much the Warhawk feels like it's hanging by a thread. Each time, the Zeros overshoot. Each time, Bob strikes. By the time fuel warnings force him home, for more Japanese aircraft are gone. 7 kills and 2 missions. That night, Japanese radio traffic spikes with confusion. Pilots report an American fighter that behaves incorrectly. One that seems to fall out of the sky on purpose. One that refuses to fight like a man who wants to live. They begin to warn each other. Avoid the heavy fighter that slows suddenly. Do not follow too closely. He is using a trap. Bob Mitchell doesn't hear those warnings, but he feels their effect the next time he flies. Because now, when Zeros see his Warhawk, they hesitate. And hesitation, Bob knows, is a harvest waiting to be taken. When the enemy learns your name, fear in the cockpits. August 18, 1943. 23,500 feet above Vella La Vella. The sky is brutally clear, the kind that makes everything feel exposed. Sunlight glints off canopies and wings, turning aircraft into mirrors. Bob Mitchell adjusts his oxygen mask, breath loud in his ears, every inhale sharp with anticipation. This time, the Zeros don't dive immediately. They circle, 8 of them, high and wide, disciplined, patient. Veteran pilots. Bob can tell by the spacing, by the way they keep altitude instead of rushing in. These men have heard the reports. They've been warned. Bob's wingman, Lieutenant Harris, comes up on the radio. "Bob, they're watching you." "I know," Bob replies quietly. The Japanese pilots are trying something new. Instead of chasing, they're baiting, feinting dives, pulling up just out of range, testing him. They want him to make the mistake this time. Bob lets his Warhawk drift slightly out of formation. A calculated risk. 1 Zero peels off, dropping fast, guns flashing. Tracers snap past Bob's canopy. He rolls, pulls, builds speed, but he doesn't dive as steeply as before. He's changing the rhythm. The Zero commits. Bob counts in his head without realizing it. 1, 2. He cuts throttle, but only halfway this time. The Warhawk slows just enough. The Zero slides forward, not overshooting fully, but drifting wide. Bob kicks the rudder hard, snapping the nose around faster than the Japanese pilot expects. The distance collapses in a heartbeat. Bob fires. The Zero's wing tears off cleanly. The remaining Japanese pilots scatter instantly. They aren't laughing anymore. By late August, Bob Mitchell's score climbs into the double digits. Officially, he's credited with 11 confirmed kills. Unofficially, the number may be higher. Several aircraft vanish into clouds or jungle without witnesses. Command takes notice. He's called into a briefing hut one evening, maps spread across a rough wooden table. A major studies him with open curiosity. "You're flying differently," the major says. "Intentionally bleeding energy. Risking stall." Bob nods. "Yes, sir. That goes against everything we teach." Bob hesitates. "Then, sir, Zeros expect us to fly scared of stalling. They expect us to protect speed." "I don't." The major considers this. "You know you're not allowed to teach this," he says finally. "Too dangerous for most pilots." Bob understands. His trick isn't a trick at all, it's judgment. Timing. A feel for machines at their limits. You can't put that in a handbook. So Bob keeps flying. And killing. September 2nd, 1943. Morning patrol over Bougainville. This fight is different. The Zeros come in pairs now. One attacks. One hangs back, waiting for Bob to cut power. Waiting to pounce when his aircraft is slow and vulnerable. Bob realizes the change instantly. They're learning. A Zero dives on him. Bob begins the familiar setup, dive, build speed, but stops himself. At the last second, instead of cutting throttle, he pushes it harder, accelerating straight through the attack. The Zero overshoots. The second Japanese fighter dives immediately. Bob reacts on instinct. He yanks the stick, rolls violently, cuts throttle mid-roll. The Warhawk shudders, half stalls, nose dropping. For a terrifying second, everything goes wrong. The Zero's tracers rip past his left wing, close enough to scorch paint. Bob slams full power, muscles straining, forcing the Warhawk back into controlled flight. The Zero flashes by. Bob fires blind. Luck, or instinct, guides the burst. The Japanese fighter spirals down, trailing smoke. Bob is shaking now. That was too close. But the message is clear. They can adapt. So can he. By October, Bob's name appears in intelligence summaries intercepted from Japanese communications. He is no longer described as a reckless American. He is described as dangerous. Japanese pilots are warned not to follow American fighters into steep dives at low altitude. They are told to maintain distance, to avoid fixation, to disengage if the enemy behaves unnaturally. Some choose to ignore the warnings. They don't live long enough to repeat the mistake. Bob's kill count rises steadily, 15, 18, 22. Each engagement adds something new, some small adjustment born of near-death experience. He never repeats the exact same maneuver. He never allows the enemy to settle into certainty. The Pacific skies are changing. The Zeros still turn tighter. They still climb faster. But they no longer own the fight. Because somewhere above the jungle and the sea, a former farm kid is proving that the most terrifying weapon in the air isn't speed or firepower. It's unpredictability, pushing the edge of survival when instinct becomes a weapon. November 11th, 1943, 26,000 feet above Rabaul Harbor. The target below is one of the most heavily defended strongholds in the Pacific. Rabaul, ringed with anti-aircraft guns, swarming with fighters, a place pilots talk about in low voices. Smoke already stains the sky where American bombers have begun their run. Black flak bursts punch holes in the air, forcing formations apart. Bob Mitchell knows this will be bad the moment he sees the radar plots. Too many contacts. Too well organized. Stay tight, comes the command over the radio. They're coming up fast. They do. More than 20 Zeros, climbing aggressively, sunlight flashing off wings as they surge toward the bombers. This isn't a skirmish. It's a wall. Bob feels the familiar tightening in his chest. Not fear, but focus. His Warhawk shudders slightly as he pushes it to maximum power, engine howling in protest. He climbs straight into the oncoming swarm. The first pass is chaos. Tracers rip past his canopy. A bomber explodes below, pieces tumbling end over end toward the sea. Bob fires in short, controlled bursts, forcing one Zero to break off, then another. He dives to avoid collision, levels out, and suddenly realizes he's alone. No wingman, no formation, just sky and enemies. A Zero snaps onto his tail. Then another. Then another. 3 of them. Bob dives hard, compressing into his seat as speed builds dangerously fast. He knows the limits of the Warhawk. He knows exactly how much punishment it can take. And he knows this dive will kill him if he stays in it too long. At the last possible moment, he does what no sane pilot would ever attempt with 3 enemies behind him. He kills the engine completely. The cockpit goes eerily quiet, the roar replaced by rushing wind and the violent shake of near stall. The Warhawk lurches like a wounded animal. Altitude bleeds away. For a heartbeat, Bob feels weightless. The first Zero overshoots wildly. The second nearly collides with the first, pulling up too late. The third stays disciplined, pulls back, tries to maintain distance. Bob flips the engine back on. The Allison coughs, then roars. He rolls hard, ignoring the G-forces tearing at his vision. The gun sight crosses the first Zero just as it struggles to recover. Bob fires. 1. He snaps the nose toward the second Zero, already turning, desperate now. Another burst. 2. The third Zero tries to escape, climbing steeply. Bob shouldn't follow. He does anyway. The Warhawk groans as he pulls up after it. The Zero's climb falters. It's too steep, too desperate. Bob cuts throttle one last time, forcing the Zero to misjudge his closure rate. He fires. 3. Bob Mitchell gasps for breath, hands trembling. He's alive, but barely. Fuel gauges dip dangerously low. The engine temperature is in the red. The Warhawk feels battered, fragile, held together by luck and stubbornness. He limps home with 3 confirmed kills from a single engagement. After Rabaul, Bob's reputation hardens into something almost mythical. Other pilots start watching him closely, not copying his moves, but learning when not to follow instinct blindly. Command still refuses to let his tactics be taught formally. Too many pilots would die trying. But Bob himself keeps refining the edge. He learns exactly how long the engine can be cut before it refuses to restart. Exactly how much airspeed can be bled before control is lost forever. Exactly how far fear can be pushed before it takes over. By December, his score reaches 30. The Japanese respond brutally. They concentrate fighters against any formation Bob flies with. They try to lure him into traps, stacked attacks, high-altitude ambushes, sacrificial decoys. Sometimes it works. On December 19, 1943, Bob barely escapes an engagement with fuel leaking and his right wing shredded by cannon fire. He lands hard, collapsing the landing gear, the Warhawk skidding across the runway in sparks and dust. As ground crews pull him from the wreckage, someone laughs shakily. "You push it too far one day, Mitchell, it's gonna push back." Bob just nods. He knows. Every flight now feels like borrowed time. But as long as he's in the air, as long as Japanese pilots keep believing they can predict him, Bob will keep turning their confidence against them. Because the edge, between control and chaos, is where he's always lived. The final count, 40 down, sky conquered. January 14, 1944. 24,500 feet above the Treasury Islands. The sky is colder here, the air thin, biting at exposed skin through the gaps of the flight suit. Clouds streak past in long, fast-moving fingers, shadows flickering over the ocean below. Smoke from distant battles drifts up in lazy columns, a reminder of the constant war raging beneath. Bob Mitchell doesn't look down. He never does. Not when dozens of Japanese fighters still hover, watching, waiting. His eyes track subtle movements, the flash of sunlight on a wing, the slight hesitation in a turn. He can read the sky like a map of the farm back home, where every dip, every slope, every gust can tell a story if you pay attention. Today, Bob has a mission unlike any before, escorting a group of B-24 liberators targeting enemy supply depots along a key island chain. Intelligence predicts heavy resistance, 50 enemy aircraft expected. Bob's own wingman formation is lean, the Warhawks fewer than the Japanese fighters, but he is ready. The first wave comes without warning. 15 Zeros dive in formation, engines screaming, guns flashing. Tracers tear through the sky. The bombers lurch as flak erupts around them. Bob is immediately on the attack, weaving and rolling, every maneuver a blend of training and raw instinct. He cuts throttle. A zero overshoots. He fires. 1. Another dives from above. He rolls inverted, nudging the stick just enough to hang in a near stall. He fires. 2. Then a third. He feels the Warhawk shudder violently from near misses and tracer strikes. Smoke stains the canopy, but he doesn't hesitate. He knows every inch of this machine. Every sound, every vibration, every warning light. His hands and feet react faster than thought. 3, 4, 5. By the end of the engagement, 20 minutes later, Bob's Warhawk limps home, riddled with holes, engine bleeding oil, and yet he counts, carefully, methodically. 40 Japanese aircraft shot down. 40 lives snatched from the skies by a farm boy who grew up learning instinct, timing, and survival on open fields rather than airfields. Command formally recognizes his achievement. Medals are awarded, records updated, but Bob is unconcerned. He doesn't fly for glory. He flies because in the cockpit, everything is raw, immediate, and alive. And the same lessons that kept him alive on the farm, attention, instinct, timing, kept him alive here, above the Pacific, against the deadliest pilots of the era. The Japanese are forced to adjust tactics. Warnings go out in quiet, urgent radio transmissions. Do not engage the Warhawk flown by Mitchell. He is unpredictable. He is deadly. Avoid him at all costs. And yet, Bob doesn't stop innovating. Every flight, every engagement, he tests the limits. He doesn't just survive, he shapes the battlefield. By the end of the war, he is not just a pilot. He is a force of nature. Closing reflection. The story of Bob Mitchell isn't about machines, numbers, or formal strategy. It's about something far older and more elemental. Instinct. Years spent working the land, facing uncertainty, reading subtle signs, and trusting gut over textbook. That instinct translated into an aerial weapon, unmatched, unteachable, and unstoppable. He wasn't a hero because he followed orders. He was a hero because he listened to the land, to his machine, and ultimately, to himself. Above the Pacific, in the chaos of war, that made all the difference. Yindi.